Hello everyone, welcome one more day to my channel Chronica Criminal. I'm Penelope and I send a greeting to everyone everywhere in the world you meet. Today's history shows us how the desire for revenge can lead a person to commit terrible acts such as cannibalism. This is Joseph Roy Metheny, who was born on March 2, 1955 in Baltimore, United States. He was a morbidly obese subject, with a piercing look, thick features and an intimidating smile, with a height of 1.85 meters and more than 150 kilos of weight. Joseph grows up in a family of 6 children, who most of the time were neglected because their father was an alcoholic and spent all the money on drinking. This situation forced the mother to work hard to support them. When Joseph was only 6 years old, his father died in a car accident. Now they would be much longer alone, as their mother had to work double shifts to earn more income. While the mother worked as a waitress and a food truck driver, Joseph and his siblings were often sent to live with other families in the foster care system. Joseph, faced with this circumstance of life, took refuge in food and began to eat unchecked, which caused him a serious problem of obesity. At age 18, he joined the U.S. Army in 1973 and served in Germany. But while Joseph was serving in the military, he became addicted to drugs. This would be the beginning of many problems in his life. The mother began to notice her deterioration. He gradually moved away from the family. His addiction led him to follow his father's path. He began to frequent bars and canteens. He came to live on the street, in makeshift camps south of Baltimore in the company of homeless people, and that's where he meets a woman with whom he would have a child. Joseph, upon learning that he was going to be a father, got a job driving a forklift in the pallet company that was dedicated to the sale and manufacture of pallets. Everything started to go well. In the company he was considered as an intelligent and very polite person. Very few knew I had an addiction problem. But one night in July 1994, Joseph had to stay to work overtime, and at the end of his day he went home as he usually did. Upon entering her house, she realized it was empty. His wife and 6-year-old son were not there. She had abandoned him and taken everything. He was very enraged because he had taken his son. He didn't care much that she left him, as the relationship was contentious due to his wife's addiction to drugs. That's how he starts looking for them without success. After 6 months, some people tell her that they had seen her on the other side of the city, with a subject who forced her into prostitution in exchange for drugs, and that they did not care that the child was present. He did not hear more about them until he learned that they were arrested for use and carrying illicit substances. This resulted in the child being taken away for neglect and child abuse. Joseph did his best to get his son back, but he didn't succeed, and this made him hate for his ex-wife and her partner. The search for the ex-wife and her partner begins as soon as she learned that they had been released, full of hatred because they had taken her son. During this search, someone tells him that they were living under a bridge with other addicted people, and decides to go get them, but did not find them. However, he lashed out at 2 people who were lying on an old mattress, killing them with an axe. He then hid them in the nearby bushes and continued his search, blinded by hatred and the desire for revenge. He realizes that near where he had committed the murders were 2 women under the bridge, and he began to ask them about his wife's whereabouts. One of them replied, but she was very drugged, and when she could not get the information she was looking for, he beat her, then abused her to death and hid her in some bushes. Then he went to the other woman and did the same, questioned her, and she claimed to know nothing and also murdered her. As he goes to hide her in the bushes with the other girl, he realizes that there was an old man fishing by the river who was watching him. So he took a tube that was in the trash and ran towards him, hitting him several blows that ended his life. He then dragged the bodies of the victims to the side of Baltimore City's Patapsco River, tried to clean the place as much as he could in order to erase evidence of what he had done. After a while, one night in 1994, Joseph brought 39-year-old Katie and Magazine to the factory. They were using drugs until he suffocated her for refusing to be intimate with him. He then buried her in the forest behind the factory. On August 2, 1995, the bodies of the two vagrants were discovered and identified as Randall Bryan and Randy Baker. A few weeks later, due to the statements of some witnesses, Joseph was charged with both murders. These witnesses claimed to have seen an overweight subject hanging around the bridges. He was forced to stay 18 months in the Baltimore City Jail, waiting to go to trial because he was denied bail. And when the trial was held, he was released for lack of evidence. When he was released, he went to the factory to convince his boss to give him a job again. He also asked her to allow her to stay in a trailer inside the property, claiming she had nowhere to stay. And he made a commitment to keep an eye on the place. His boss agreed because he considered him a good worker and gave him the keys to the place, trusting in his goodwill, not knowing that Joseph had other plans in mind. I would take advantage of the location of the factory, which was on a cul-de-sac and isolated from the road. It was the perfect place to commit his misdeeds. In November 1996, he took Kimberly Line Spacer to the factory and stabbed her to death for refusing to be intimate with him. He said in his confessions that after killing her, he cut the victim's meat and placed it in containers he kept in the refrigerator. He also said that the remains of the body were buried inside the factory, and that same week he set up a hamburger stand where he claimed to mix pork and beef with human meat without anyone noticing the difference. He even mentioned that many people told him that the burgers were the best they had ever tasted. He added that everything was going well until he ran out of his special meat, so on December 8, 1996, he took his new victim, named Rita Kemper. They shared drugs inside the trailer until he tried to be intimate and she refused. Rita started screaming, but there was no one to help her. So he mustered up the courage and, in an oversight by Joseph, ran out of the trailer. Joseph followed her, dragged her back, and told her he would kill her. Rita, how she was able to escape again, ran to a wire fence that also had spikes on top, but that was not an impediment for her to jump. She ran out onto the road where a subject was passing in a van that stopped when he saw her. He took her to a nearby gas station, and there they called the police. Joseph, meanwhile, picked up his clothes to leave because he knew they would soon go for him. However, he failed to escape. Upon leaving the trailer, one of the officers was already there and was immediately arrested. During the interrogation, he was told what the girl who escaped had stated: that he had threatened her by telling her that he would end up like the other girls who were buried in the woods. Unsurprisingly, he denied it, saying that he did everything with her consent. So they release him for lack of evidence. Joseph then turns to a friend to ask him to help him dig up Kimberly's body that was still inside the factory. But this friend was unwilling to help him and reports him to the authorities, arguing that Joseph asked him for help moving the body of a woman he had buried to the side of the trailer. The police went to the place and rearrested him, and even arrested the owner of the factory for complicity. Upon questioning him, they get Joseph to give them the exact location where he had buried Kimberly. The police immediately went to the site, where they managed to dig up the body of a woman. Interrogations continued, in which Joseph confessed to other crimes, including the previous victim Katie and Magazine. The police go to the place and find a shallow grave where he had buried his remains. They noticed that she was missing much of the skull. However, her identity could be determined thanks to dental records, and indeed it was Katie. But days later, he claimed to be a serial killer and that he had committed 13 murders, as he threw the bodies into the Patapsco River and that they had never been found. He even claimed that some of his victims had cut them into parts, that he had kept the meat and then eaten it until he came up with the idea of setting up a food stand to sell human meat burgers mixed with beef and pork. These statements at first were shocking, but as the days went by, the the veracity of his words began to be questioned. The police daily took him from one place to another to indicate where he had buried the victims, and so a month passed and they could never find any victims that Joseph presumed to have killed. The detectives no longer knew if Joseph was telling the truth or was just raving, since everything he said was too fanciful to be true. In addition, Joseph was known to be a liar and have the ability to invent stories. In 1997, he was tried in the case of Rita Kemper, the last victim who managed to escape, and was sentenced to 50 years in prison for attempting to kidnap and abuse her. In 1998, he pleaded guilty to murdering Katie Ann Magazine, and on July 14, 2000, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. No evidence of the crimes he allegedly committed was ever found, nor could it be ascertained whether he actually opened his hamburger stand to sell the bodies of his victims. The only murders that could be verified were two, that of Rita and that of Katie. His mental imbalance was remarkable and led him to create false confessions. In one of his last statements, he said the following: "The words 'I'm sorry' will never come out of my mouth because they would be a lie. I am more than willing to give my life for what I have done so that God may judge me and send me to hell for eternity." On Saturday, August 5, 2017, he was found dead in his cell around 3 p.m. at the Western Correctional Institution in Cumberland, Maryland, of unknown causes, at the age of 62. Well, friends, I hope the case I brought to you today was to your liking. I invite you to be part of this community by subscribing to the channel, and if you like what I share, give me a like. I would also love to read them in the comments. Thank you for being here watching me from anywhere in the world. See you in the next case.